Who's in charge of the lights? Yeah, I know. Does she go? Right, okay. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
No, you see, they have to turn it off and on. They have to all very high. You know, when people are going to actually use the slides. So you just question. Off or not. Well, I thought I was. Well, I can do if I need one. We can't stop. Brent.
Good morning, all. This is where I get to do my aircraft stewardess invitation. And that on safety grounds, we have the exits here to my left, my right, and right at the back. And leave your luggage behind when you leave the event. Don't bring that out the front. So you're all very welcome here this morning. What I know will be an interesting day, and I feel this is in a certain sense a unique starter day where communities themselves are getting involved in the questions that are coming up. But I will give you a far better introduction from Aidan McLaughlin, who is the founder of Good Energies Alliance and is a volunteer who has organised Erasmus projects to get some volunteers under the Erasmus project to help our whole endeavour. And she has studied science herself and done a lot of work in communities and in EU projects. So if you're ready, you can have a word. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. And apologies, I think we're okay now with regard to the lines. So, on behalf of Good Energies Alliance and Love Leitrim, I welcome one and all to Manor Hamilton, and to this part of Ireland, to lovely Leitrim, that many of you may not have visited before. So, welcome to the land where Neolithic people settled 6,000 years ago. Welcome to the land where our ancestors marked the many sacred places on this land: court tombs, passage graves, cairns and ring forts. Welcome to the land of myth and legend, where the Tuatha Danann, the Druidic race, descended on Sliabh Éireann, that is just down the road from us, in ships of cloud. Where Fionn McCool's grave still stands on Sheemore, where every rock and field has a story, mirrored in magical townland names: Cashel-a-Vila, Graig-na-Sléibhe, Gobna-Currafor. Welcome to the land of poets, scholars and visionaries, the land of Yeats and Maud Gonne, of Turlough O'Carolan and John McGahern, of the flautist John McKenna and the visionary Sean McDiarmid. To the land of small holdings and a people with a connection to and a strong love for the land for hundreds of years. Welcome to the land where now they're proposing a new type of colonisation, where they're making plans for fracking, taking over hundreds of acres and turning them into industrial zones, destroying the heritage of the place and changing the land and its communities forever. We in Leitrim reject this proposal. In our campaign against fracking, we know that we must look to our energy future, but we have been brought to the realisation that there is another way. There is another kind of future. That by working together and embracing renewable energies, rural communities can create a future that can provide sustainable income and jobs, that will not harm the environment or people's health, and can result in energy security and greater well-being for all. As Pope Francis said in his wonderful encyclical, local individuals and groups can make a difference. They are able to instill a greater sense of responsibility, a strong sense of community, a readiness to protect others, a spirit of creativity and a deep love for the land. They are also concerned about what they will eventually leave to their children and grandchildren. Our vision for Manor Hamilton and for all Irish rural communities is that by reducing energy use and embracing ownership and buy-in to renewable and sustainable energy projects, they will have energy security and prosper through regeneration of their towns and villages and their communities, leaving a heritage for their children and grandchildren that they can be proud of. So this day is designed to let people know of the potential of renewable energies for themselves and their community, and to allow a space for discussion and forward planning. And just as a comment, I would like to say that this day has been totally organised by volunteers. We in Good Energies are coordinators of an Erasmus Plus project that has brought 3 volunteers from Europe into Ireland, from Ukraine, from Romania and from Spain. 3 wonderful young people who have worked extraordinarily hard to make this event happen, and you will hear from them later. And I just want to pay tribute to them and to the other volunteers that have really put all in to organise this day. So again, I welcome all of you here today and hope that you have an enjoyable, an interesting and an inspiring day. And now I would like to hand you over to the chairperson of this session, Liam Breslin, who is also a director of Good Energies Alliance Ireland and also happens to be my husband. Okay, thank you.
So I can say thank you very much for that, very sincerely. An introduction to the day that's ahead of us. And you might have heard the occasional ping from Aileen's phone. And the reason for that was a good reason, I'm afraid. It was that one of our volunteers is actually streaming these proceedings live on the famous internet. And my good friend whom I'm about to introduce, Aileen Ryan, has tweeted and it pinged along here. And so what we're doing is of vital importance than we have here. Now, as you can see, I'm not brilliant at this job, so it's fortunate for me that Aileen Ryan requires no introduction. As you all know, he's the leader of the Green Party, and he's a great person to have here because, he is not only in a position to speak to others, but he can listen and hear what others say. Because, for instance, he is chairing the Digital Climate Policy Group for the Institute of International and European Affairs, which to me means that he kind of gets to hear it all and gets to influence it as well. He's working in one of the world's top 15 environmental think tanks, and at the moment discussing influencing business and political delegates, and from Ireland and overseas to discuss climate change at the climate gathering. So I think we're very, very fortunate to have somebody with that level, apart from his many other affiliations, to address us this morning. So I give it to anyone.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to be back at this, for me, the second event to come from the Good Energy Alliance. We had a very interesting, a brilliant session in Carrick-Chan last year, and I was very honoured to get the invitation and to come back on this occasion again. And if I can, I wanted to kind of set a context, or set a fairly broad framework that maybe might help the various discussions that are going to be had here today. And I should add, as well as working with the Institute of International European Affairs, I also work with an organisation in London called A3G on European climate and energy policy. So that also just informs kind of my thinking in terms of what's going on in that broader picture. And I think we need to understand the broader picture to be able to understand what, we need to think globally and act locally. And when we get those two together working really well, it will really work locally. I would also should say, I'm just fresh from last night or yesterday. There was a very interesting and significant conference in Maynooth that Trócaire were organising, and they had some of the top people in the world. They had a speaking on the issue of climate change. So I'm informed by that. Speaking of thinking big, Mary Robinson spoke there on who's the UN Special Rapporteur on climate change. And there was a chap called Bill McKibben from an organisation called 350.org, and that 350 is coming from the clear scientific understanding that if we are to stop our planet spinning into utterly destructive runaway climate change, we have to lower the level of carbon and other greenhouse gases in our atmosphere to 350 parts per million. And that all the science and all the analysis says that if we're going to do that, we are going to have a 100% decarbonized power system within the next 2 or 3 decades. And I always put that first because everything I do in this space is informed by that assumption. And I think it's important that in our government policy, in the white paper that's due to come out later this summer on energy policy, or indeed our own approach to the climate negotiations, which will take place in Paris this year, I just think we need a certain honesty or a real debate. If people don't agree with that, I would love to hear from them, because I'd love to know, well, are we to say that we will not tackle climate change? That we will abdicate our responsibility in that regard? That we will ignore that remarkable encyclical that the Pope published? I don't know if people had a chance to read the papal encyclical that came out last week. For me, anyway, it was an amazingly powerful articulation of the moral argument. Put aside the religion, just the moral as applies to anyone of any religion and none, for us to take action on this issue. And the energy system is one of the places where we can do it. It's going to be really challenging in farming. It's going to be really challenging in transport. But the first place we can do it, as I see it, is in energy. So that drives that's my motivation. It's a moral motivation. But also, it's a motivation that makes economic sense, particularly for this country. 90% of our energy is imported fossil fuels. We are the most exposed, one of the most exposed countries in the world for any future increase in fossil fuel prices or any disruption to the supply of fossil fuels. 3,000 people die prematurely in this country each year from the air pollution coming from the use and the burning of those fossil fuels. We have some of the best alternative renewable energy resources in the world. So are we going to say, no, Ireland's not going to do anything here, sorry, we're different. We're opting out of the great moral responsibility of our challenge of our times. And, Ireland's going to keep giving 7 billion every year to the Middle East, rather than turning to our own power supply. Doesn't make sense. This is an opportunity for us to go to a better system. And I think that's where I come from. And I'd love to hear people have a different vision as to where we should go, because I think we have a pause at this present time. We pause because government are reconsidering their policy. We pause because we've lost public support and confidence in relation to development, particularly of renewables, particularly because the way that the large wind farm projects in the Midlands for export to the UK was managed. And I think that's no harm to pause. It's no harm to step back and say, well, what do we really want to do here? Can we get some sort of consensus, and can we go on from here? If I can give some very broad, brief thoughts, and I'm conscious of time, look forward to questions and answers as to maybe how that might work. Firstly, I do think we need both a distributed new system. The advantage of this new technology is it allows you to develop power at the local level. It allows you, particularly with new solar power supplies, but also with small-scale hydro, with using biomass, with using waste materials, as well as wind, to develop a whole new, completely different, what they call distributed energy system. There's a fundamental change occurring in the energy system. It is completely changing from this old system, particularly in the electricity side, where big power stations looked at what the demand coming from the consumer was, met that demand, and it was a big, centralized, big company, big kind of modeling of that kind of system, be it money point, or be it nuclear, or be it coal-fired or oil-fired power stations. That's the way electricity has worked for the last 100 years. It's completely changing. That old model is dying. The companies that relied on it are going to die. There's a new system coming, which is a bottom-up energy system where people can develop at a local level. It's a reality. It's happening all over the world. It's happening in America, it's happening in China, it's happening in Europe. And I think we need to grab that as an opportunity, and particularly there's an opportunity for a new ownership system of energy as we move towards a more distributed system compared to a centralized big power plant control system. And that's another advantage. This can be owned by everyone, not by the few. While it will be distributed, in my sense, particularly if we're going to a 100% renewable system, which I think Ireland can and should go to, It also means you do still need a grid. You also still need to be able to move power over large distances, because there are times when the sun will not be shining or the wind will not be blowing, and you need to be able to balance power supplies over wider distances. And a grid helps, strangely, even though a grid is a big kind of system, it's part of that big kind of wider system. It does help local production because it provides that backup structure and allows you to balance power over a wider area. So as well as having lost public confidence on the kind of issue of wind power in recent years, we've also lost public confidence in regards to the grid. There's huge controversy around the development of grid. People do not like power lines in their communities, it's understandable. We need to address that, and we need to think and come to some sort of consensus as to what we're going to do. I think we are going to need to connect into UK and France, and indeed beyond to the west of Germany. The big development at the moment, the project I'm working at in my work with E3G, is on the European Energy Union. I'm off to Amsterdam tomorrow to speak about it, and spend a lot of time in Germany and France and Britain talking to the various governments. The reality is, Europe is moving towards this system, a more regional electricity system where you ship power across borders. The risk for Ireland, and the real risk, is that we're now going to be excluded from that. That because we got the Winlands, Midlands and the interconnection project wrong, I think it was wrong because it wasn't community owned, because the grid wasn't even community owned. We've created a sense of division that has done huge damage to public confidence and support in what we're doing. We got that wrong, and okay, let's start again, and let's look to see could we do it in a different way. And among community ownership, I include public companies. My original thought and vision on this, and we were setting in Mountain Government setting out massive investment by the ESB, by Culture, by Bord Namona, by Bord Gash in this alternative energy system, because I see them as publicly owned companies as part of a community system. Okay, it's not quite the same as owning your own particular local plant, but ESB has been our company for 80 years. It has delivered for the people of this country. So has Bord Namona, so has Culture, so has BGE. I think they have a role, but they have to be owned by the people. In my mind, I think it was a mistake to sell Bord Gash Energy, because I think owning it makes a difference. Being our own company, there's just a slightly different motive or sittings, and these companies are good companies. These can do it really well. They're not, they're very professional in how they work. So I think we do need to go back to look at, and the reason we need to look, in my mind, in connection with the UK and France and beyond, is because I have a vision of a 100% renewable power system, and to do that, you do have to share power over a wide area. It's much cheaper to do it that way rather than try to provide storage here. And we have a commercial advantage because we have very good renewable resources. And that's one of the things I think we need to do, and need to work out how we're going to do it, because unfortunately the real risk, actually what's happening at the moment, is that we're not talking to the UK, and the UK is not talking to the rest of Europe. We could well turn into an isolated energy market, which is very expensive, and which doesn't balance our power over a wider area. Secondly, we need to make sure that we do also connect north and south. We have a difficult grid project which is before planning at the moment, and it's not an easy one. It's hard to do it. It's up over the Dublin County through Monaghan, Cavan, up to Tyrone, and we need it. And it's not going to be easy. It won't be easy to build it underground, as everyone would like to do, because you don't have to look at the pylons then. But what we risk by not building it is cutting off the north again, and actually going away from what we developed in recent years, which was an all-Ireland energy market. And that was, I think, one of the most important political developments cross-border. This part of the country more than anywhere else. I used to come down the road here from Rosinver, which is a closed road up a few years ago. The damage that did, why would we go back to a divided island on energy? And that's where we're going, because if we can't build our connections and share power across the border, the North will have to go a different way. It'll have to, and it's very close to this now, saying, sorry, it's not going to happen. We can't rely on our power coming from the south. We have to build new power plants in the north just to keep the lights on. It's close to that. It's not easy stuff. This is deeply contentious, but that's the choices, one of the difficult realities choices we face. I also would say, and this is a difficult one because the wider grid plans that EirGrid have, building a grid connection to the northwest, to Mayo and this region, building a grid connection to the southeast, as well as the one to the north. There's a political opposition, very understandable, and we should be building the vast majority of whatever we can underground. Not all of it will be able to, for a variety of different technical reasons, but we should, wherever we can, build it underground. But the risk and the difficulty of what's happening at the moment is we're scaling back our plans. There's a dramatic reduction in the sort of ambition of the ideas of connecting the northwest. And the risk for the northwest is that doesn't just scale back development of renewable power, but it scales back economic development. And actually increasingly, and I'm talking to people at large companies looking at big investment decisions, they're going to go to Dublin more and more and more and more, and our young people are going to go to Dublin more and more and more, unless we actually wake up and say, well, we have this resource in the northwest. We could run, if you get which has been planned, really high quality broadband, new broadband connection from New York into Mayo, and you have a clean energy system there, you can start to put digital industries into the northwest, because you've got three key ingredients any industry needs in the modern world: broadband connection, internet, water, and clean water and power, clean power supply. Apple will refuse to do data center, which is not renewable. And there are loads of other companies like Apple want to invest. They will not invest in the northwest if we don't have those components. And if we get one, if you get the power link, then it makes sense to get the broadband link, and then you're up and running. And that's the sort. And this is away from the product. This is big planning stuff, but we should be thinking big. We should be reversing the inevitable flood of economic investment towards Dublin, where those infrastructures are in place, and say, no, we're not going to just see the country tip over to the east. We want development to the west. This will also be said in the white paper that's going to be out later this summer. Critically in the white paper, to win back public confidence in my mind, we need to change the ownership structure. And the development of solar power in particular gives us this opportunity. Bill McKibben was saying yesterday that this is the revolution that's taken place, that solar power has come down in price by 75% in the last 5 years, and it's not stopping there. This is what's killing the old model. Everyone knows it in the industry. And even in cloudy Ireland and Northern Ireland, solar is going to make sense. The real question is, okay, we're starting at the beginning here. We haven't done anything yet in solar. What do we do? I think one of the concerns I have, and there's a big conference on in Dublin as we're here today. I'm very glad to be at a big community kind of led project in Dublin, in Manorhamilton, because in Dublin, the big industry is meeting today. And their plan is for real large-scale industrial solar in farm, out in the field. Yeah, it's good, it'll develop the power, but I have a concern that it's back to the old model. It's big international finance, and the money's there, the finance is already there, big companies are already there, but I prefer to see it develop in a different way. I think we should go first to rooftop solar, every house, every factory, and develop that power supply. And it's a really sensible power supply for us because it complements wind. You know, wind comes on a cloudy day, low pressure. You've got the grid connection, you're using it full tilt. When the wind dies, the sun tends to come out. And then you've still got the same grid link, so we can use that power link to balance wind and solar the way that would work for us. But I think it should be every one of us owning it, as well as owning wind. And not just through the Bordemonas or the Cuiches or the ESPs. There's a really interesting organisation in Belgium I saw last month there, where local people in a renewable energy cooperative are buying shares in their own power supply. They're using it to build big wind projects, because wind, unfortunately, the economics of wind is that scale does matter. It's very hard to get a 20 metre, 20 or 20 foot, whatever turbine to really make sense, even in very windy Ireland. That's why they're getting slightly bigger. But I think even if they get bigger, that Belgian ownership model, you can start with a share as low as €250, and it's working for them. It's a model I think we could adopt here. gives you a share even in a bigger wind farm. That's what it is, truly community owned. And we can structure that in ways so that those living nearest maybe get preferable terms and preferable arrangements. That's what we need to do. In solar, it's even easier because it does come. You can put it on your roof. But we don't have the mechanisms to sell it. We don't have, if you look at what the German government is doing now, the German government is changing their entire market system. They have a green paper out in March, written in English. And what they're doing is they're creating this completely different market structure where there's a dance between demand flexibility, where you could be clever in terms of how you use electricity, you take price signals to adapt your use, but also with variable power supply at the centre. And that's the centre of the market arrangement, rather than big stations. The price is set and the market is designed to suit those small providers. That's what we need to do, change our entire system to support local people selling their own power. And the system at present precludes it, stops you doing it. We need to change that. It will help in the use of biomass. I personally, there are a lot of people saying, I respect people coming back saying, don't do wind. They're saying we should convert money to biomass, we should convert the peat-fired power plants to biomass, we should do more of what they've just done up in North Mayo, this new Kalala plant that they're building. I'm very deeply skeptical. I'm always follow the money and look at the price. How much is it costing to build that Kalala plant? About 4 million a megawatt, 3 or 4 times the price of the renewable alternative. And there's real sustainability issues in us shipping, which they will have to do, or which we're already doing in Eden Dairy, palm kernels from Indonesia to Ireland to burn. There are environmental issues, land use issues around that globally. Which think globally, there are big land use issues around that. And I think there is opportunity for us to develop biomass solutions, and for the Irish farmers, it's a real opportunity. It's a willow. It's very similar to taking in silage, same equipment. So it does make sense for us to develop biomass. But I think it'll be used in local food factories and other factories. Because the real benefit of using it that way is that 80-90% of the energy is used in heating in the industrial process, and it's creating jobs in food industries at a local level. Whereas in a power plant, 2/3 of the energy is lost as waste heat that goes up a chimney. We just don't have enough wood. We're talking about hundreds and millions and millions of tons of wood material if we're to convert Moneypoint and our peat-fired power stations, I'll finish in a minute, to biomass. And we don't have the wood. I know, I went looking for it. There was a factory came to me and my time as mayor said, I need 100,000 tons of wood. I said, fine. Went talked to Kiel to talk to people. Listen, we have an economic opportunity here. The factory's going to employ a couple hundred people. Can you give us 100,000 tons of wood? No. We're using it in the board factory down the road here. You either shut the board factory in, is it Drummond down the way or Drummond? We can't do both. We don't have the wood. And shipping it all in from Texas or from wherever, Indonesia, it's the same. We're not developing our own resources. We're smart here and use our resources wisely rather than being dependent on a boat coming from Malaysia, which is what that other alternative path would require us to do, and turn a blind eye to what's happening in Malaysia in terms of where that wood comes from. There's other opportunities. They're bigger, long-term. Hydro is limited, but there is small micro hydro we could develop. The big opportunity marine is an opportunity, but I'll be honest, it's not certain yet. It's still a 20 to 30 year bet in terms of real scale. Offshore wind does work, and we can look at that, and it's getting more and more competitive. Offshore hydro, tidal and wave is the real potential. If we crack it, we have a boundary that makes us unlimited in our opportunity in the sense. But we're not certain about it. We need to develop what we know is certain. I'll finish with a slightly political point that there's no political support for this switch at the present time. Our political system is very sensitive to opposition, to wind and to grid, and we react to that by scaling right back and actually holding back on investment, holding back in a sense of direction. And I just don't think that's the right response. We do not have time. The planet is burning. Those who follow late will get least advantage from the transition to this better economy. We will end up buying technology for the countries rather than developing it ourselves. We have every opportunity to develop that technology ourselves and to use the power-to-power economy that particularly helps rural Ireland. And that's where we need to go. A prosperous community, owning their own energy, using it to create other economic opportunities. That's the prize that we have. We need to listen, talk to each other, have these sort of events to make sure it happens in a really collective, collaborative way. Thank you.
Well, it was with heavy heart that I did, because I could actually listen to Eamon all day long. What he was saying was so informative and so relevant to what we are all thinking. So I thank him for that, and I also appreciate that what we're talking about, what's of interest to us, he's not just doing here for this 20 minutes that I cut him out. He is actually in doing that. He will leave the room and, as I said, go to Germany, France, and was it Afghanistan? No, Amsterdam. And will continue working for us hard on all this. I do appreciate that. Now, I believe you have all been welcomed in here by our chairperson, who appears beside me, Janice Rainey O'Connell, who I know for some 15 years for her work in North Leitrim in the community, and she has welcomed yourselves and the councillors here along you, and thank you for coming. As chair, I might just remind you what you may already have read in your packs on the agenda for today, that we will have our speakers, and following that we will have tea break, and after the tea break we will have some short workshops which I will try and help to arrange, and after the short workshops we'll have question and answer session at that stage, and then lunch. I noticed that it doesn't allow for the chairman summing up, because I would actually hate to have to try to sum up what Eamon had to say to us. But one of the things he did say was that there have been mistakes, and you can see that on the internet, that in regards to wind power there has been mistakes, and he suggested that we should all own it in the community. So for that reason, we are very, very fortunate to have as our next speaker, Pauline Gallagher, who will speak about a remarkable community energy project in Neilstown. Now, Pauline, as you can well imagine, has been active in the community in Neilstown, which is, I believe, near Glasgow, and she has been working on community-led regeneration in her area, resulting in Neilstown Town Charter. For instance, they bought one of the closed down banks, and is now the headquarters of the trust. But what's important for us today is her role in the Neilstown community wind farm. So it's a community wind farm, 10 megawatts, joint venture with a commercial developer. It's the first of its kind in Scotland, and it's now complete, and it's actually in generation. And she has also served on the Scottish Climate Challenge Board. But in other words, she is going to talk to us about how to avoid the mistakes and how to go forward on some of the lines that Eamon has suggested. So I give you both that.
Hello everyone, and can you hear me? Is that all right? I'm delighted to be here for many reasons, partly because I've never been to Leitrim before, and I've only known about it through reading John Gahern, and I'm also pleased to be in beautiful Ireland, because of course with a name like Gallagher, you don't have to go too far back in Donegal before you find my folks. I'm also very delighted to have heard Eamon, because one of the problems about coming from somewhere else, even though it's just across the water, to talk about what's happening there, is that you don't contextualise your comments properly. And I have to rely on you to do that, and to ask me the questions you might have in mind, because there's no point in me going into a lot of technicalities, not that I could, but I'm going to try to anticipate what you might be interested in to hear in terms of Neilstown's story, and I'm absolutely sure that I will miss a huge amount. I just want to refer to Aidine's poetic introduction, which practically had me crying, but the poetic nature of a reference to this ancient land, and of course its ties with Scotland. And it came to mind a quotation from, I think, I'm not sure who it was, but that we do not so much inherit the land from the earth from our ancestors as take care of it for our children. And so we are here only for a little time, and sometimes we get very wound up with the preoccupations of the moment. But one of the things that the climate justice and the climate change agenda forces us to do is to connect with those much, much larger issues of time and scale. So that's where I'm coming from, and I think one of the, I pick up as I go along some of the things that I try to note from Eamon's delivery, but what I'm going to do is just go into my presentation. I'm going to start really talking about what, on a very positive note, what we started out to do in Neilston, and it wasn't to own our own energy supply or own a wind farm at all. It was about our place, and I think we're in a moment of incredible possibility in this part of Europe, in that so much of what we know about our system has been negative. It's been about the fact that things falling apart, quoting somebody, not far from this place, and feeling that the forces that are raged against us are so huge and potentially negative that we can't do anything. But I think, in contrast, we have a convergence of possibility. And I think it's very important to honour the energy that Aideen and her colleagues and the lovely people from other parts of Europe who have come together to affirm these values, that we are actually, we have place, we have economy, we have resource, we have culture, all coming to a common point. And I think to lose sight of that is to disadvantage us, because in fact we have huge potential. So Neilston is a former mill town. It's a beautiful countryside, not unlike Leitrim, outside 12 miles from Glasgow. And although it looks nice, that's one of the better shops, it's actually, as a post-industrial community, has actually got quite a lot of problems. So one of the things I like to say about Neilston is that, taking a very bad shop place, is that it's an ordinary place. And that's what I am pleased to affirm about it, is that it's an ordinary place. It's not some special environment. It's a small town in a small country, and there's plenty of small towns in this small country that are having huge problems. And I was hearing last night that the government is preoccupied in Ireland with the pushing some of the development activity out into the rural communities. And I've just come from a holiday in the Hebrides, and that's exactly what's happening there. Some of the most interesting work is being done both at community level but also by local government in supporting community endeavours. My own background is in urban design and place making, to use a horrible term, and so I'm passionate about that quality of place. But of course that doesn't exclude all these other concerns. What I want to do just very briefly is to very quickly, is to, I'm trying to work my own laptop and this thing at the same time, is to talk about the Scottish context, because just very briefly you might be interested to know where this project of ours is located. There's been a massive rise in community-based action around land ownership, energy, and general local development over the past maybe 10 to 15 years. The Scottish Government has recognised this as a way of mobilising local capacity and action in a time where there's pressure on resource. So everyone's looking around for new ways of doing things, smart ways of doing things, making the pound go further, and also building that community confidence that is so elusive in some places. So last week, in fact, a Community Empowerment Act was enacted in the Scottish Parliament, which reinforces some of the powers that already existed in terms of community right to buy land and property, and extending that into the urban areas. So if you want to see more of that, you might go on the Scottish Government website. Some of us feel it could have gone further, but there it is. The challenges sorry, I keep doing this, but in fact, what I should be doing is this. The challenges for all of this, especially in the context of the Scottish political, sorry? What have I done? Nothing? In the context of the Scottish political system just now, is that you're looking at changes in the local democratic institutions. And, you know, I know in Ireland that you have 31 local authorities, we've got 32, and there's an issue there for me as to how you can devolve real power, real control into even smaller groupings than even those 31. And what happens for the sort of subsidiarity that we will talk about. The other thing, so we're not there. I mean, obviously I'm here to talk a good game, but we're not there. There's a lot of challenges in there that I could bore you with. But I suppose suffice to say the fact that AD has asked me to come means that there's something that she hopes that you might be interested to hear. So here's the Scottish Prospect 2 is that we have 200 community trusts in Scotland. The Community Trust is nothing only a company which is committed to the kinds of goals that we would embrace. And the Scottish Community Alliance, of which I'm chair, this sounds very important, it's actually very light touch, represents a huge number of these networks. And I think that maybe is something that's distinctive in our between Scotland and Ireland, is that we have developed networks which represent the various sectoral interests that communities have, so that people have support mechanisms, and the Alliance is a kind of umbrella that speaks to government on that kind of coordinated way. So basically, going back to Neilston, and I'm going to weave through what we do as a community, so that you get a sense of where we located our interest in renewables. We wanted to make Neilston a better place to live in, with a well-designed environment, a good quality of life, and that begs lots of questions, which we can speak about. Well suited for the 21st century, and this was right at the beginning. That encompasses the sustainability agenda, because where are we? We're in the early years of the 21st century, and that century will see huge changes. And where will a little town like Neilston be at the end of that century is the big question, and we have to ask it. With local people leading. And again, a lot is contained in that statement. For instance, a game of hopscotch in the street looks pretty innocent, but in fact, one of my interests is the common life of a place and how you stimulate and hold that. So that was our agenda setting out in 2004. And we've translated that now into, I'll just put these up here, and then we can talk to them. Where am I? It's not working. Yeah. Physical excellence, a good place, a quality place. Now, there's a lot to be done there. And it's got all the sustainability agenda. What kind of sustainable infrastructure do you build in? Neilston's just been allocated a pilot status by Cycling Scotland for the cycle-friendly community. Now, I tell you, we're up at the top of a very high hill, but once you get into Neilston, it's an eminently cyclable area, and we've actually made it a destination for cycling in Scotland. We also have our charter. Now, this is a document here. I only have one copy of it, but you can get it online. I'll show you the Trust website at the end. And that was the culmination of our original purpose, which was to get a strategic plan led by local people for our place. And I have to say that we work hard to make sure that in constructing the consultants team, we had a sustainability champion, because of course those don't tend to be the issues that fill a hole, unless of course you've got fracking around the corner. So we made sure that was there, and it was championed championed. So that in the 44 projects in the Charter, there are ambitions for sustainable development, i.e., oh, it might be nice to have a wind farm. Oh, it might be good to have sustainable food production. So they're there, they're embedded in the Charter. The Charter is now actually being incorporated into supplementary planning guidance, which is a statutory instrument as part of our local planning process. So that's actually a first for Scotland. It's not very glamorous, nobody really wants to hear about it as such, but it's there and that's hugely important. So lots of talk and lots of work involved in that. But we're also about people, and just very, very briefly to tell you about the Community Right to Buy, the Scottish legislative framework. You might not be interested so much, but we have ownership of that building at the former bank. A very torturous process. I've been before you about that for a long time as well. But we eventually got the money to refurbish it to a very high standard, and it's open for business and it's the Renewable Trust as well. We also have, on the subject of renewals, a pellet boiler which was funded through a grant from the Scottish Government, and we also have solar water on the roof. And we also, the people thing is so important, because why would you be doing this anyway if you wouldn't be doing it for people? And the bank has become a real hub for the things that we do in the world of Neilston. The Pakistani Pipe Band came to see it, and also speaking to Santil yesterday about the fact that we had Galician pipers to come to entertain us at one of our festival days. We have a volunteer programme which is very important, and there's a lot of talk about volunteering and the fact that it's replacing paid staff, but I'll go on quickly, but it's a very important part of what we do, both of necessity, but also in terms of our social purpose. Networks and partnerships are colossally important. Our networks are obviously different from yours, but if you don't build those networks and genuinely listen to people who may not actually share your views in the first place, you'll never have the capacity of the groundswell to actually achieve your aims. Sorry, I'm running ahead of myself. There's the volunteers, there's our bike volunteers, our litter pickers, our gardeners, our traffic staff, and here we are. Now we're into the real governance of it. But I hope you don't mind me just talking about that, because this is not just about, let's go out and get a wind farm, wouldn't that be nice? It's about a whole rooted process in which the wind farm is part of how we do business and how we render ourselves sustainable for the longer term. There's an information sheet. Unfortunately, there's not maybe one for everybody on that table over there. And should you again want more information, go onto the Neilston website and you'll find the notes there. We have a joint venture partnership. We have a 28% stake in the 10 megawatt wind farm. As Eamon was saying, big wind, i.e. scale wind, is where effectively you get efficiencies and where actually the environmental impact is reduced because turbine speeds, rotations and flicker noise is actually mitigated by the bigger you get, paradoxically. We have the opportunity of getting about 10 million. I mean, even if it was 8, would it matter too much? Over the life of the farm. How did we get started? We tried to, someone saying they knew the Whiteley wind, the biggest onshore wind farm in Europe, at least when it was built, is about a couple of miles from us, 140 turbines and growing. We were aware of this and we tried to engage with those developers as to whether we might get some reaction, but there was no talk of that. But we got an introduction to a commercial firm who were pretty clued up about how they would ease their way to planning consent in a landscape that's getting increasingly difficult to get consent in. So we we were absolutely tickled with this, clearly. And after that, we got going and started to go forward with the project which we now see in front of us. A very memorable Halloween morning, 6:30 in the morning, with these massive things, massive turbine blades arriving, and the logistics of getting that picture were colossal. And it was a lovely picture of a wee boy in his pajamas and his wellies come with his mum to see this thing, and it was just a delight, and that was a good moment. And here they are, twirly, burly, and whoosh, they were named by the local school kids, and that's, of course, you may know this lady, Nicola Sturgeon, who's now the First Minister, came to open the project. So again, I won't labour this because it's maybe slightly technical, but basically there were steps to be going through to get the thing moving. But our partners were very keen to move this quickly because the ground, even then, was beginning to move. The what do you call them? Planning, the payments, the tariffs were about to change, so there was a lot of pressure to get into the rock camp before it started to fall apart. So we had the community consultation, obviously, given what we were proposing to people, and that went well, although we had a neighbouring village who we had leafleted at great length and so on, who suddenly woke up to the fact they were Sleepy Hollow village, tiny village, as the crow flies nearer to the site than Nielsen, but as the crow flies, because there was actually some topographical sort of protection. And they woke up one morning and discovered that we were actually meaning stuff, and they got really quite nasty with us. So what I'm saying to you is, although this might look like a walk in the park, it wasn't. And we didn't have the context which Eamon has described of this massive failure of confidence in the whole wind enterprise. That wasn't the context for us, although there's a big campaign, and of course now Mr. Cameron has basically closed down the opportunity of more onshore wind because of the removal of the subsidy. But everything was pucka. There was nothing that could be done. The judicial review was thrown out and so on. So if you're looking at doing it yourself, and again, I'm sure in Ireland there would be maybe different issues to bring to bear. And the question is, would you get someone coming through with a proposal such as ours? You've got high risk development capital, because until you get consent, nothing is going anywhere. You've got maybe the technical expertise to really do a proper appraisal and really be on top of the consultants and so on. It's colossal. And what was interesting about our model was that we had experts as partners. We were actually in bed as legal partners with a company that really knew their onions and they weren't going to take their shareholders up the garden path. Who's got the time to become a walking expert on the technicalities of wind power and so on? And then the other thing was, how could we raise the money as a small community organisation with no security? How could we get the kind of funds that we were looking for to invest? I won't bother you with the model, but we were looking for about £1.5 million of equity investment into the wind farm, which had a total value of about £15.5 million, because it was 80% of our mortgage was already on offer. So we had a great difficulty and a very sore year of my life was spent trying to raise that fund. However, we did kind of prevail. I think that's me in that slide. I'm just going to put all this up and then right. again, it's maybe not worth my while giving you all the figures because there is this information sheet. But basically, it's 100 megawatts, 4 turbines, the big kind. And we got, we had senior debt, again, really technical, I didn't know what that was, but it's kind of mortgage at 80% through the Co-op bank. We weren't able to get up to the 49.5% stakeholding, but we managed to get 28, which is just fine in the long term. So we're already getting, although we've got huge loans to repay, so we're not actually, there's no tours of the Bahamas going on yet, just quite yet, although some people might like to tell us that that's where we're heading. So the learning from our project is that you have to really work hard. You have to assume nothing about people's response to you. Anybody that's worked in this area knows that if you don't like the heat, you should really get out of the community kitchen, because it's about the face-to-face encounter, the fact that you have to tell people the same thing maybe 15 times and with increasing generosity rather than impatience, to build the consensus to get rid of this decision. More importantly, perhaps even, is the fact that in order to remove or mitigate the issue around what you're in this for, you already should have some kind of sense of where you want to go with this newfound resource, because this will be big money if you're successful. And it's one of the issues that I bring up anytime I get the opportunity to do so, is that these are free funds. This isn't a grant offer that someone's going to come along and say, remember you said you were going to build that hall? Did you do that? And where? This is about accountability, transparency, and also about knowing where you want to go before you start. So that's why I'll talk to you a little bit about the charter. This idea, this is about a much bigger picture than just bringing in money. And you have to have that mandate. So you have to have a governance structure that allows you to take that responsibility. And you have to have political support. Obviously, it would be lovely to have Eamon around most of the time, making the kind of statements he's making about ownership and the state control of energy supply or buy-in. We didn't, this is the problem. Community energy, for all that it's big in Scotland, and the Scottish Government's embraced it. It's set a challenge, a target of 500 megawatts in community ownership by 2020, I think. So, despite that, we are working in a system which is monopolised by the Big Six, where the investment and the cash receipts from that energy industry are shooting out of the country and over into the big energy companies that own so much of Scottish Power, etc., etc. So it's a macro political issue, and it's also a micro one. You have to have good professional advice, the very best, and it has to be independent, and then you have to pay for that. So you have to budget for that. But I'm maybe getting a bit kind of too prudential about it just now. Let's look at the wider significance of community energy. It provides a resource for the building of new social and economic base. And, Eamon's spoken about it, we know about it in global terms. That is actually a powerful tool, and without the cash, you can't do it. It gives you this virtuous circle, which is so diverse in its impacts that it's hard to describe and virtually unknowable, because you don't know which will give the pull and which will give the push. But if it's not locally based and owned, as Eamon says, well, tell me how it's going to be. It stimulates local ownership of the carbon reduction agenda or the climate change agenda. Most people in Neilston, you may be surprised to hear this, are not waking up in the morning and saying, how can I reduce my carbon footprint? people are really just as addicted to taking the car 100 yards for a pint of milk as they would be anywhere else. But in order to establish this groundswell that we have to, and quickly, one of the ways you can do it is just by making visible the fact that there is this connection between the energy we produce and the energy we use, and the way that resources are earned and created. So here's where I've got absolutely no idea what this might mean. I would be delighted if Eamonn's presentation this morning was actually evidence of a real enthusiasm for community ownership. I have to say that the reason that I'm here at all was that I was speaking at a All Ireland Energy Conference. I think it was industry-led, but it had ministers speaking. This was in February in Dublin. And there was a reference to community energy in the programme. That's why I was there. But as far as I could see, and this may have changed, the only reference to community was about educating our communities so that they can be less resistant to wind farms. And I thought, no, this can't be it. There must be another story coming along. Now, surely it's about community benefit payments, which are non-mandatory but very effective in Scotland in giving communities a cash handout over the life of the wind farm. No. There was nothing about community benefit. There could be an unveiling of some really important initiative around community ownership, and there wasn't. But obviously we had Dara from the Aran Islands, and we had the Temple, what was it called? Temple Dairy Farm. So there were obviously great things happening locally, but not having this energy. It seemed to me a policy and strong political understanding of what this could mean, particularly in the rural condition. If you were to do it, if you wanted to do it, you'd have to have a structure which would give the community access to loans and grants. One of the reasons we could do what we did was that there was a social enterprise fund, and there were social lenders such as The Big Issue, the street paper. They have an investment arm that we could go and get loans. They were expensive loans. We're looking now at maybe doing a community share to maybe redeem some of those loans. But that was too complex at the time. We really had enough on our plate. Obviously, community share. Our model is only our model. There are hundreds of other ways of doing it, and if you want to look at the website of Community Energy Scotland, you'll see some of the ways in which people have done their own thing. I don't have to talk to Ireland about community building. People in Ireland have done stuff for themselves since those druids had landed in their spaceships all those years ago. But there's a structure and a movement that has to get to feel its own strength and become maybe, I would suggest, maybe more organised in that kind of network framework kind of building thing in order to feel its strength. And local economic development, well, we've heard about it already. I've been hearing about it from the team, how these things could really impact in a regenerated local economy. So again, I think that would be a wonderful thing. And what would Nielson's message to Lynchburg be? It would be harness your own resources. They're there to build your own sustainable future. There we are. That was the little kids of Nielsen. We'll be reaping the benefits of what we've done over the years, and on our opening day. And what will you need to do this? You'll need a strong community organisation, a really strong community organisation, because if you were to be following our model, you would be wanting to partner with a commercial company, and they're not going to deal with amateurs is wrong. We were amateurs, volunteers. But they want to deal with people who are savvy. And so that's I keep talking about the context. You have to build your credentials. And I don't have to, the credentials of this lot are pretty strong, I'll tell you. The clear vision thing, where are we going? Where are we going? and an organisation that knows how to build partnerships throughout its area of expertise, of action. And so it's ours to make. It's ours to make. If we don't make it, others will do it for us. We are looking out to our future in Neilston, and I wish you well, and do keep in touch. Thank you.
So I want very, very especially to thank all of you for coming all the way from Scotland to share this with us. And it looks like it's ours to make. It's up to us. I have to admire her timing. She stopped 3 seconds before this. And it was Chairman, I thank her for that, but I thank all your time for So we ourselves in Good Energies Alliance, together with Love Leitrim and with the help of our volunteers who are here, did a survey of the energy use in Manor Hamilton. And we went to 10% of the households in, we believe, in Manor Hamilton, and asked them how much they spent on energy, on ESB, on gas, on coal, and on petrol and diesel within a year. And I hope that they are now getting ready to present to you the results of this survey. While they're doing that, I have to introduce them to you. There's Amina Tilly, and she is a town planner from Romania who has come to help us with our energy work. I want to sit up here or smile or anything. And you're ready to give the presentation, yes? You're starting. I suppose we started by Olga, who this is Olga. And Olga has come from Ukraine to help us for a year. And as we've had difficulties here on the border, close to the border, she has had difficulties of the same kind right in the middle of her country, but she's still prepared to come and help us. By profession, she is an architect, she is an artist, and she has worked with us very heavily in the publicity area, and she's also been studying biomass for us. So I give you over to Olga.
Good morning, everybody. As Liam said, my name is Olga. My colleague Irina and I, we are both volunteers with Good Energy Alliance Ireland and the Erasmus Plus program. And we have been responsible for undertaking the Manor Hamilton review, and we will try to present the results. So, what is today? Let's have a look at our review of presentation. So, we're going to present statistics about Manor Hamilton population and households, the energy audit, and what does Manor Hamilton spend on energy. So, total population in Manor Hamilton in 2011 was 1,336 people, almost equal split female to male. This slide shows breakdown of Manor Hamilton labor force compared with national average. The total available labor force is 617, of which 478 are at work. So unemployment rate in 2011, according to Census 2011, is 22.5%, when national level was 19%. This slide shows an analysis of the housing stock. 553 houses are occupied and 268 are vacant. Out of the occupied houses, 35% are rented. A further breakdown based on the number of rooms. The majority of houses is 5 rooms. Moving to home heating, we can see that excluding electric heating, 87% of houses are heated by fossil fuels. Majority of them is heated by oil, and after that it's coal and gas. So now I turn on to Rina, who will expand what does actually Manor Hamilton spend on energy. Thank you.
So when we decided to do this event, we realized that it would be a good idea to actually know how much Manor Hamilton is spending right now on energy. So that was the idea of the energy audit. We first asked ESB and the Regional County Council and the Central Statistics Office how much Manor Hamilton spends, but unfortunately they didn't. So yeah, so we decided to do our own energy audit. So we created a questionnaire, and we put the questions like that were most important to us, like people living in the house. The information about the house, so if it's insulated, what type of energy they use, and in the end, how much do they actually spend on energy. As Liam was saying in the beginning, we took a sample of 10% of the houses, that would mean 56 houses from Manor Hamilton, and it's because we didn't have the resources necessary to build the houses. And from this, we extrapolated to the entire town. So what we found, regarding the houses, we actually found that the census was right. Most of the houses were rented, and oil was the main type of fuel used for central heating. But we did have other questions. We also asked people about their interest in energy efficiency. So if their houses are insulated or they have double glazing. And we've discovered that 38% already had their houses upgraded, and from the rest, there's a 43% that would like to do it in the future. Regarding the fuel consumption, we found that the costs are split. Almost half people spend on the transport, having an average per car of 1,600 euros per year. So this is how much people in Manor Hamilton spend on petrol and diesel every year. And the rest is split for the household between electricity and other sources like oil and gas. So regarding the electricity in Manor Hamilton, we found that the more rooms you have, the more you spend on energy, nothing there new. And that means a total per year of almost $500,000 that people spend. So if we actually calculate what would be the average cost per household, for electricity it would be almost 1,000 per year. And for the rest of the home heating fuels, it would be 1,300 euros. So we added, and the average spend without transport would be 2,250 euros per year. This is for the average household, so that's 5-room house. And the end result of our survey is how much Manor Hamilton spends on energy, and for a year it's over 2 million euros million euros. So these are the results of our findings. Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much. You can stick. I want to thank our two volunteers, Irina and Olga, for that presentation, and not only for that, but for coming to spend a year with us here in Ireland and support us. This is only a fraction of the work they have done, and of course Sandy, who is working on the media. And this whole project is has been supported by the European program Erasmus Plus. Erasmus Plus is a very wide program, and this section is youth mobility, where they support people moving from one country to another on a volunteer basis. Now we're obviously running a little bit behind time. You've obviously spotted that I misread one point on the agenda. So Cormac Walsh is here on behalf of Renewable Energy Co-operatives. Basically, he would just introduce himself, because as Pauline has pointed out to us, we need a certain structure and so on. And having worked with Cooperative Development Society myself, I'm familiar with cooperatives and how they work, and you will need this to be there. So Cormac will come up, and then hopefully he won't be that long. Basically, just introducing his organisation, which we don't need to know so much about today, but we do need tomorrow to make actual progress on this. And then we will have a question and answer session before 11 o'clock, where we might get some tea and coffee. Is that coming? Yes, that's coming. So, hand you over. How much time do you want to talk about? Thanks.
Hi everyone, Cormac here from Energy Co-ops Ireland. We set ourselves up about 3 years ago, and effectively to date we now have 5 co-ops around the country. We are a co-op ourselves. We set up the first one on the Aran Islands, who you may be familiar with. I know Aileen is going over in, I think it's Sunday, for a few days. I'll go on to that in a second. So we have, outside of Dublin, we've got the Aran Islands, we've got Clare-Monas, we have Ballyman, and we've got Tralee. And the whole idea behind this is to try and get a vehicle. So everything that's being said up to now is fantastic. But to take this a step further, you have got to have some sort of vehicle that you can, as a community, you can get into and decide for yourselves what you're going to do. You decide one area would have certain resources, another area would have different resources. So that's the first thing to do, is to actually structure yourself in something that you're comfortable with. Energy cooperatives in Europe are absolutely playing a huge role. As of the end of this month, we're hoping to be the Federation for Energy Cooperatives in Europe, representing Ireland. So in Europe, there are 310 energy cooperatives in this group, and they represent groups, small communities, medium-sized, and up to very large communities owning their own very large wind farms. So that's what we want to bring that type of model to Ireland. So the best example I can give you is the Aran Islands. So 3 years ago, they set themselves up, and it just takes 8 people. So we just look at 8 people amongst ourselves, and we say, right, okay, now we are going to begin this process of taking control into ourselves and seeing what we can do. So to date, what the Aran Islands has achieved is they looked at about 5 different possibilities in their area, what sort of technologies they could employ, what sort of community benefits they could generate, etc., etc. So they had a period of time of looking at what's available to them. And they actually decided at the end of it that, to their surprise, some of the technologies weren't applicable to them that they thought they would actually have. So they said, right, okay, we're going to have to think differently. So what they did was they decided retrofitting is the thing for them. The benefit of retrofitting is that they had the SEAI on their side, and the first year they put into the Better Energies Communities Programme, they had €600,000 worth of retrofitting done on 3 islands. That second year was something like 850, and last year was 1.4 million. By the year 2016-17, 100% it is hoped of the entire building stock on the 3 islands will have retrofitted to a high SEAI standard. That's 100% of the entire building stock. So when you think about that, it's a fantastic end result for 8 people who come together to actually create an energy co-op 3 years ago. Very short space of time. So that's just plan B, and that's a rolling program. What they're now looking at is the possibility of bringing a wind turbine to the island. Beside the wind turbine, they will own this, so the co-op will own this wind turbine. Beside that, they have a sea salt manufacturer who will come to town and create 8 to 10 to 12 jobs. Permanent jobs that are anchored on the Aran Islands, and they will create the Aran Island sea salt brand, and that will be sold internationally. Besides that, you're going to have a distillery and a brewery, and you can think of poutine being sold as a brand via the Aran Islands around the world, so they have a huge market for something like that. And then the third thing that they want to do is grow food on the island in polytunnels, etc. Because normally all the food has to be brought in every day. It's the islands are just rock essentially. So that's what they want to do, and they're taking control of their own resources in their area. And this is going to take time. So the turbine has local issues, planning, etc. So it's not a walk in the park. But that's the plan. So it's demonstrating if you create a vehicle that people can understand. So they get support from Galway County Council, they got support from the SEAI. Dara was up at the awards ceremony. They got the award, Best Community Awards from the SEAI last year. He's been up presenting to the department with ourselves, the Department of Energy in Dublin. And that's the kind of credibility that they have built up is because they're in a recognised vehicle. So it means that in a very short space of time, this community could actually have an energy cooperative formed by getting 8 people willing to actually take this forward. And going back to what you were saying earlier about getting a project, you need to get a project that the community is happy with to move forward into. What you do not want to do is create something that people will just talk. It needs to be structured, and our best advice would be to get somebody very strong to be the chairman of that particular group, and have a vision, and have an easy win as your first project. So don't try and do the big project first, do the small one first, and get credibility in your group, and get momentum in your group, etc. And the SEAI funded an awful lot of that work and will continue to fund that. We, Energy Co-ops Ireland, are trying to change the model of reliance on the SEAI totally, even though we know that they're great assistance. But they have a finite pot of money available to them for this type of work. Our next co-op is the one in Claremorris, and that is taking the European model of a cooperative being formed and going into local partnership with the local council. So in this case, it's Mayo County Council. And it's a joint venture. The idea behind it is that the co-op will own and run their own district heating scheme. And it'll be built over 3 phases. So the idea is that they've picked a small-ish loop to begin with, and it consists of the county council building, fire station, the national school across the road. Back across is 20 or 30 old age homes. Beside that is Tesco and a swimming pool. And that's the loop that we created on the first phase of it. So in that, you've got community benefit. This is in relation to heat. So heat is generated into these premises and buildings, and there's savings to be made. The supply going in to create that heat is coming from biomass, which is outside the town, which is very nearby. So you're creating jobs that way. So the whole concept is you're replacing fossil fuels, you are creating jobs locally, you're creating sustainability. And this is in theory, so you're actually doing it in practice. But that's their first project, and we're looking to actually take that model and roll it out around the country to different councils around the country as well. So with that, you've got a community who are taking control and deciding on one project first, and then they can go on to do a whole variety of other things. But they're doing it bit by bit by bit. So the next one we had was is in Ballymahan in County Longford. And that group is also made up of individuals, politicians, local councillors, business people. So it's all these things are totally representative of the area that you're living in. So they are the community. But in this Ballymahan example, you may have read about 2 months ago, Centre Parks from the UK are coming over, and it's 100 million worth of development in the middle of a forest. One of the big problems that they have 4 sites in the UK, but their last site in the UK actually had a series of problems. And they recognise that, listen, if you don't have the local community as part of your development, you're going to walk into all sorts of problems. So as an example, they've already met with Centre Parks twice, this energy co-op, and the idea behind it would be that they would take the waste, which would be an enormous issue for the planning of that project, from Centre Parks and use it for a district heating scheme in the town. So you're beginning to see that the cooperative is interacting with local businesses that can come in, that you can attract into the area, and both sides are helping each other, and you're creating in the process real jobs, sustainability, and all the things that we're actually looking to create that we talk about. But you've got to have the vehicle first. And if you're happy with the idea of a cooperative is one member, one vote. You do need certain skills within the group, and we will advise you specifically on what type of skills you need. You need to be formed legally in the CRO. All this can be done in a week, 10 days. So it's very doable. It's deciding to do it is the key. I go on to lots and lots of different things. So I think that's just giving you a flavour of it. And just to say that we're bringing the Minister, Alex White, the Energy Minister, over to the Aran Islands on the 29th of July. And anybody here who is just interested, isn't going with Aileen on Sunday, would be more than welcome to come to that. There'll be a series of announcements being made on the day by the SEAI, by ourselves, by the Aran Energy Co-op. And it's just, in the white paper coming out in September, we are told there's going to be pieces of good news for communities in terms of following, hopefully, the Scottish model in terms of a shared ownership. It's a long story, but that's something that we would love to see happening. And we were told confidentially that that's hopefully going to be in this white paper, so that's hopefully positive. So there's that, and that's pretty much it, what I have to say, I think.
Thank you very much.
Indeed, thank you very much for that comment. You've done more for Prosperous. All I just look. 11:15 for coffee. It's 11:15. I'm more than 5 minutes early. I have been very moved by these sessions because it appears to me that over the morning we have moved from worldwide concerns down to the very practical. So we have everything. And the other thing that occurs to me is I'm actually very honored to be here in front of people who are so advanced in their thinking, who are kind of thinking about the future, not everybody is, and who are ready to take action down those lines. And I think this is a terrific place to be. So as Janice pointed out, we're going to have some question and answers now, followed by tea at 11:15. You don't want to go in cold. And then after that, there'll be short workshops. And I must play with my bell then when it's time for you to come to the workshops, because we'll be rearranging the chairs in between. And also, Janice may have given you some questionnaires on entry if anybody wants to have them back. So, can I shut up and ask if there are any questions? I'm sure there are.
I'm still collecting surveys, so if you want to copy me.
Leslie has a question.
If we have to rearrange the chairs, we're going to take everything with us, yeah?
That's very good. Thank you very much. We're going to rearrange the chairs into workshop format. There'll be 4 workshops, and they will be color coded according to their badges.
Can I have a quick question? Just in relation to.
Just a minute. There's a person in the back here.
Okay, that's the
People
overhead here from Good Energy Alliance, but also from Activate Energies. I was impressed with all the speakers, but I have a specific question for Pauline, and that is, in relation to Nielsen, how many households, per se, are actually plugged in to the windows as such?
Can you hear me? Yeah. That's not the model, because interesting here again, we're talking about local distribution networks. This is plugged straight into the national grid, and so the nearest thing you would get to that equivalence would be to say that I think there's over 2,000 households, 2,500 households in the instance. So we would be equivalent. We would be meeting that energy demand for electricity. I wouldn't be wanting to be quoted on that exactly, but that's how it works. The stuff goes in, we get the electricity purchase price for that, and then we consume at the normal way. So we don't have any, we don't sell energy to our local. That would be lovely. An electricity supply company in the next month would be great, but we're not there yet.
Is the cost neutral then? Is the cost neutral?
I'm not able to answer that question, because for us, we're talking about supply and sale to companies which buy. We're obliged to buy on an fixed price on an annual basis for 3 years ahead, and so we're selling to Statkraft, who are I think a German firm. So it's all very huge and multinational. But it would be lovely to think, for instance, if you had smaller solar plants, for instance, could you actually, and we're lucky to have on our board someone who's PhDs in this very matter, so next chapter, come tell you about that in a couple of years.
Question here, the first one.
I don't know any of this, but anyway, I just wanted to ask Cormac Walsh there, your co-op, that's all volunteering, I presume. And so if anybody wants to get information or get help from you, is that free gratis?
Well, ourselves,
Yes.
we're going to be the overall federation for cooperatives. So,
Okay.
I mean, currently, if somebody wants to come, nobody supports us.
Okay.
Nobody. So, I mean, we've now had to change our model to actually charge to set up a cooperative.
Yes.
We just don't have any money.
Okay.
So in order for us to create more co-ops, we need to do that. So it's going back to the model that if you're paying for a service, the community has to actually. So what we suggest is that a cooperative sells shares to its community. It could be €50 each, but it could be more, whatever it would be, to pay for virtual sort of required services that are in use. to get it established.
And is that model set up, or do you have,
Oh, yeah.
do you have that?
No,
Okay.
it's absolutely
Okay. Thank you for mentioning.
Did everyone hear the answer there? This one here, this gentleman.
Perhaps it's not so much a question as a comment, but my name is Duncan Martin. I'm in Georgia Eco Village, where we have one of Ireland's or Korea's first district heating system in private housing developments, and it is essentially a co-op. I'm struck by a couple of things. First of all, when these co-ops are setting up, none of them have come to talk to us to say what lessons have we learned. We've learned a lot, so they do come to talk to us. But also to pick up, I think Pauline made a very good point about lack of technical expertise in the community. I would broaden that out to say lack of technical expertise in the country. And Scotland may be much better endowed than Ireland in this. There are, and I'm going to be blunt about this, an awful lot of bullshitters out there who will tell you they know all about X or Y. And when you actually out when they're tested, first of all, they frequently turn out to be men of straw, because we do business with them, they've gone bust a few years later. And there could be some women of straw out there. Well, I'm not being sexist here, but all those we found on them, I'm sure women are much more reliable. But the real is there's a lack of technical expertise. So the one big piece of advice I give is I really think if you are going to go down this sort of road, if you're going to use, we want to bring employment and jobs and business to local companies. If you're going to use local companies to do it, I'd seriously consider getting a consultant in from a country like Denmark or Germany or Sweden, where they know this sort of thing really well, to keep a really tight rein on and control on and eye on the people who are doing it locally. We could draw a list of incompetence as long as several people's arms, just in terms of our own experience, and I hate to see other people going down the same road. So do come talk to us.
Just to follow that up, we were down at the event that you put on there in Bob Jordan about 2 weeks ago. To the event in relation to cooperatives about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, so we were at that and we brought one of our co-ops there.
I wasn't.
Okay. No, just so we brought one of our co-ops down, so it was the first everyone in.
Just asking to respond to some of these points.
Yeah, no, just again, just need to give a little bit more details because they're relevant. I referred there to a Belgian example. I just happened to meet them last month. An organisation, it's not a company, it's a cooperative, ecopower.be. You can look at, they've been going since 1991, which I think makes them interesting. They have a large scale, like about 50,000 members. But they have gone to the next step in the sense that they, not only, as I say, do they issue €250 shares that you can invest in an energy system, in an energy project that they do. I think you can have a maximum, I think, of up to 50 shares is how they do it. But the really interesting, and the really successful aspect of their model is they are actually also providing electricity. They're acting, and they've made that next step in terms of delivering an electricity, and obviously they have complex arrangements with the power purchase agreements to make sure that they can do that to their members. And the critical thing is it's lower price because it's not for profit. There's no margin for the profit and I was just thinking, I think it's remarkable work that was done in this survey. It's very useful, it's very tangible. And I was thinking about your example of raising €900,000, whatever. Even in Manor Hamilton, just take Manor Hamilton, let's say energy efficiency is key. And let's say if there was a really push campaign to push energy efficiency, let's say to save 10%. We can all save 10% in our energy, by you just drive at 5 miles an hour less, you're immediately saving 10%. That's one example. Or in the house, just simple measures would save 10%. That in Manor Hamilton would be €200,000 a year. Now, €200,000, you're in the game. I think that figure is very important. 500 homes, 2 million, save 10%, you're starting to get 200,000 to work with. And I do think that Belgian example is a good one because they've been going for 25 years. And I think you're right, Duncan, we have to learn from this because we're all making mistakes in this stuff. This transition could be very difficult. We spent 100 years building around oil-fired boilers, oil-fired cars, oil-fired everything, gas-fired everything. we have to switch in the generation to a non-oil fired system. And we have to do the learning of 100 years in 20. But one of the learning things is 2 million, 10%, in my sense.
Right, thank you very much indeed for that, Eamon. Now, I recognise two more people, but before I go to them, I want to ask, you heard that on the side. Before I go to them, I want to ask, is there anyone from Manor Hamilton here in the town that wants to ask a question about this? In that case, we have a question here from Mary. I recognize just two people at the moment, starting with Mary and then Terry. Yeah. Thanks.
My concern is this. My name is Dermot Bailey. Co-ops are not new to this country. Unfortunately, they have got a great history. We had farming co-ops of the past who eventually sold out to...
Because I have, as I said, I've been working for a number of years. I think over coffee we can discuss.
All right, so I'll just make a point. The business, we had the local water supplies, which were installed by the local people and have now been taken over by a larger company.
Sorry, Jeremy, can I just ask you from the chair, what big business has a credit union been sold out to?
Well, Glanbia.
The credit unions, I'm thinking.
No, I didn't say credit union.
No,
I said the farm.
This is not really, to my mind, the place for dispute about credit unions. There's three of us here.
I never mentioned credit union. Never mentioned credit union.
Cooperatives.
Farm co-op.
Yeah.
It's not a criticism, it's a question.
Okay, go back to you.
No, I think it's a discussion over coffee, to be honest. We could spend an hour going backwards and forwards over it. I mean, there's perfectly good examples of cooperatives working absolutely fantastically all over Europe and in Ireland, so it's an argument.
Right, thanks for that. Terry's question.
We spend a lot of import and use a vast amount of energy. I think it's 40% in domestic homes and that. I was wondering, is there any research, I couldn't find any, in terms of a cost benefit analysis, like what would it cost to retrofit the national housing stock where necessary for insulation and general energy efficiency, and then how much actual energy, obviously we're using a certain amount of energy just to go out the windows and up to roofs, so how much energy would we actually save nationally? I mean, I must say, I have a motive for asking that. I'm obviously quite concerned about fracking. They're talking about we get a certain percentage of energy, probably only for 6 years of gas or something. And I'm wondering if a much smaller investment in retrofitting and energy efficiency would actually give us maybe 3 times the amount of energy that the gas companies are promising for fracking and destroying the country.
Can we just mention that very fast? Sorry,
I'll just answer. The SEAI have done a series of reports over the last 5 years on the Iron Islands. On the 29th of July, with the Minister, they're going to be announcing the results of those particular ones. And they're very interesting in terms, they took, one of the reports is they took the Iron Islands and they actually used it and said, look, this is a microcosm of the entire country. What if we took all this efficiency work, etc., and applied it to the country as a whole, and therefore they extrapolated out. So there's some really, so look out for the 29th of July.
Can I just say, it's not easy. If it was easy, it would have been done. And it's not easy for 2 or 3 reasons. Firstly, you can't, insulation energy efficiency, by the very definition, you can't see it. People spend a fortune on fitted kitchens because your friends can come over and you can see it. Whereas by definition, you can't see insulation. Although it does, if you do exterior insulation, the house looks really good and it really does work. But it's expensive. Like to do the real job, the real what they call deep retrofit, we're talking about 20, 30, 40 grand, depending on the house. But that's probably where we need to go next, in my mind, and to work out the financing of it. And the financing has to recognize that that's going to take a payback of 15, 20 years. So it's not an easy payback. Most banks won't invest, or it's very hard to invest in anything that's less than, let's say, a 4 or 5 year payback. That's typically how finance works at the moment. So we do need, if it was easy, we would have done it, but it is a big opportunity. And one reason I think it's a great opportunity, I very much like the survey, and I like the last question, what would our young people be doing? In terms of, if you answer the previous question, yes, there are many jobs. And I think particularly in an area like Hamilton, it's in food, it's in tourism, it's in digital services, but the other quarter of the jobs that I think are there are in energy. And the definition of energy jobs has changed, because not a lot of people are working on wind farms. Is energy. The building profession, that's where all the jobs have lost, that's where the jobs have migrated out, particularly rural Ireland. I think we need to redefine that category of jobs as the key employment opportunities. And our building workers, we people are good at that in rural Ireland. It's an employment of them in that sort of 15, 20-year project work is where we need to go, and we need critically to get a match long-term finance, pension funds, state public money to willing to pay on 11, 15, whatever, 20-year payback. And I think spending 30 grand in a house rather than just 500, because I think it's time to do it as a big job rather than piecemeal.
Thank you very much for that. I have to apologise for the people who have indicated lately they have questions, because there's no time, and I have to apologise to, I think there's through my support telling me there's 30 minutes behind time, so I have to apologise to the rest of you for that, and I have to apologise to people for providing coffee. Please make a note of the colour on your badge, and come back here when I ding down the bell. And nice, there's one gentleman back here.
Thank you. My name is Pat Leary, I'm from North Energy Co-op, and just in response to Duncan there from South Jordan, both I and one of my colleagues did attend the 3-day district meeting for South Jordan, where it was excellent, outstanding, and we did take on board everything you said. Yes. So lots of lessons from it. We met the Danish experts and Temporary Energy Agency. We learned a lot from them. Just one question for Ryan. During his term of government, the Green Party introduced a carbon tax, and to date, that carbon tax has collected 1.6 billion euros, which we were told would be ring-fenced. And my question would be, is there any of that 1.6 billion now available for grants for energy co-ops or energy projects? It's a lot of money, and we're talking here about financing projects. 1.6 billion would finance a lot of projects. Thank you.
Yeah, the analysis behind the carbon tax was done by a number of academics, Frank Comrie, UCD, John Fitzgerald, and PSRI. And the modelling they did is say, so what you want to do with the money is you want to protect against fuel poverty, and that's a real issue when you put a carbon tax on. And that was done with an increase in the fuel allowance and the extent, the level of fuel allowance and the period that applied to, because that's the first priority, is to try and avoid increased fuel poverty with carbon tax. To reduce income tax, and we tried to use it, although we're raising every tax at that time, it was such a difficult time, but we tried to use it to alleviate employers' PSRI, because that we thought was the best way of reducing tax on jobs. But there was, we went into the start of government saying, over a 5-year period, we would spend 100 million on retrofitting buildings, and we'd all sorts of schemes to warmer homes scheme and to do that. We were able to actually increase that budget to 100 million a year rather than over 5 years, so it was 5 times higher than we originally planned. And that was booming. The level of retrofitting of buildings five years ago was almost twice, more than twice than it is now. It's collapsed in the last 4 or 5 years for a variety of reasons. So my experience of that is we were able to do it. It was deeply unpopular. I remember coming up to a petrol station once where my own face was on the bloody handle thing, because people were not happy with it. But it's still, I think, it was the right thing to do. And I think that retrofit budget, the concern, I was listening this morning to, I don't know if people heard on the radio, Neary, the economists were on from the trade union movement. And I think they're rightly saying that in the budget that we're looking forward to, we're not spending enough on capital investment, that the projected capital investment is too low for what we need to do. And I would say, this is not an easy political thing, rather than tax cuts, I would be using what breathing space we have to increase capital investment in retrofitting of buildings and putting solar panels on roofs and for investing in public transport, because that's what we need to do, investing in broadband. It's those investments that we need to do to create employment that provide, just to avoid the mistakes I think we made in the 10 years run up to the crash. We got into a political space of low tax and high spend. You can't do it. It just doesn't work. So I do think we should be spending more on the capital budget on things like retrofitting of buildings, broadband transport, because that has a productive return. It's a real investment. It may be a 10-year payback, but you know it's real.
Right, thank you very much. I better explain what you're doing now before you go. I have these sheets, and the plan is to break up into 4 workshops in the areas of wind, solar, hydro, and biomass. So when you come back with your coffee, if you take your coffee directly to the workshop, that would help. So I would start off here in the wind energy corner with Arena. So if you have a blue badge, you can go to this corner, a blue dot on your badge, like mine. Mine is white. You can go to this corner with your coffee within 10 minutes.
Bring your chair with you.
And your nose, please. Now wait, please. There's 3 more to go. Solar. The solar is Leslie here, who's going to take this red plate, you put it on this, and you match it up.
But I will be talking about cost benefit analysis for rent. Okay.
That will be very much appreciated by the workshop. Hydro energy is then Seamus from Hamilton is going to be right down at the far end with that. If you have a green dot, you'll follow him. And the biomass then is over here, and this will present that with the yellow one. Now, the plan is this: we can't all sit around in the workshop, so we split into 4 as you have been split. And we spend the arena and the volunteers will give you, say, 10 minutes talking about whatever it is, and then there's 10 minutes for questions and answers, roughly speaking. And when that 20 minutes is over, you then move with your card to the next station, hopefully clockwise. And then so everybody, by the time we get together, when I ring my bell, you will have seen every presentation and every question will have been asked. Hopefully every question. Yes. Is that okay? That's here.
Okay. Those in the hydro don't have to move their chairs because there are extra chairs in the back. So the other 3 workshops, you will have to bring your chairs. No.